Morning. This is Invest in Women and Change the World. I'm Denise Rastari, Forbes.com contributor, and I amplify the voices of girls and women. Today we have an incredible panel because, as you can see, we have three incredible women on the panel. Everyone loves a personal story. So if you will, tell a story about investing in women and girls, what that means to you, with a story that starts with, I saw, I heard, I am, I learned. Melinda, would you lead this conversation?
Sure. For me, it really has a lot to do with traveling over the last 10 years to places like Bangladesh and India and a whole host of African countries. I would go out in these remote villages, let's say in India, to talk to women. And you'd sit down and you'd often sit across from a mat on one side of the mat and them on the other. And you'd start to talk about their children and what they want for their children and their dreams for their children, and can they fulfill those dreams. And you talked about basic health needs, water, etc., food. And what always struck me was how similar they were to the people I know in the United States, my friends, myself, that what you dream of for your child is to get them on that trajectory, to be the person they want to be. And they would say, I can't even decide to have one child now and 4 years from now have another, so I have a chance of feeding this one and then educating the other one. And I thought, that's it. That's the universal truth of what we want to be able to have. And yet, as a mother, you can't give every good thing to your child unless you can plan for those births. And that's something that's just not happening around the world. And we can talk about why that is, but it's been off the global health agenda for the last over a decade. And I think that's really a crime. So
I would like to take everybody to 1944, month of June. A young girl is arrested in Belgium by the Germans, and she goes to the concentration camp of Auschwitz, where she works in the weapon factory at night. Well, that girl was my mother, and she did survive. She went back home. A few months later, she got better. She got married, and the doctors say, no matter what you do, you cannot have a child for a few years because you won't make it, nor will the child. Well, here I am the child. So my mother taught me that fear was not an option. And my mother's also taught me that no matter how bad it was, she was never a victim. She was lucky to have survived. And therefore, for me, freedom is the most important thing. I personally found my freedom, my very simple freedom and independence through my work. And I, but now my motivation and my mission is to be able to give as many women as possible the possibility of freedom.
I left my career on Wall Street in 1986, and I moved to Rwanda to help start that country's first microfinance bank. And I saw that a small group of human beings, in this case women, really could change at least a pocket of the world, and in our case, make history. At the end of the day, dignity is more important to the spirit than wealth, and dignity comes from a place of freedom, from choice, from opportunity, and that if we are going to create a world in which everyone has dignity, there has to be a way that starts by seeing low-income people as full human beings, building solutions from their perspective, and insisting on scale and sustainability. And that's really where my organization, Acumen Fund, came in 2001, built on so many of the learnings from that period.
Thank you. So we now know the compelling stories behind your stories. We can go now to the how. How are you investing in women and girls? And what does that look to each of you? And we'll start with Jacqueline, if you can start this one.
Sure. What we do is raise philanthropy, but we invest equity and loans in entrepreneurs who are focused on long-term social impact, not short-term financial gain. So we've invested about $75 million in 65 companies, and have seen those companies reach 90 million people in the last year and create 65,000 jobs. The overwhelming number of jobs have gone to women, not because the entrepreneurs were focused specifically on women, but because they think that they're the best people to employ. The services primarily are purchased by women, and the most important thing in some ways for me is we're learning so much about what it takes to get clean water or healthcare in a way that women can use and make good use of, but that's also sustainable.
I think you have to look at where women are represented in society and where do you need to invest very strategically to get an outcome? So for instance, one of the things that the Acumen Fund does, I think, incredibly well in agriculture, if you look in Africa, 70% of the farms are farmed by women. At the end of the day, it's about women lifting themselves up, as you said, and lifting their families up, because when they get that extra income, we know they plow it back into the family. And so I think one of the great things that Acumen does is they really are working on the ground to see how do you invest in women in very strategic ways in all these different countries around the world.
And actually, it's really about leadership. I think that I am extremely involved with this organization called Vital Voices because it really speaks to me, and because it's not, giving charity, but it's really helping women leaders. And sometimes a leader, it doesn't have to be a big leader. It's a small community. And but what is extraordinary about the leadership is these are all women who have had the courage to fight their own misery. And then after that, and they've had the power to survive, and then the leadership to help.